Jason, wave your hand at me.
Okay.
There's Jason.
It's so dark, they said we couldn't see him.
I haven't met Jason yet. I wanted to make sure Jason was here before I introduced Jason. Or someone was going to start their acting. Louise was going to come up here and pretend to be Jason for a moment. As you all may know and may not know, human trafficking is a lucrative industry. It actually ranks within the top 3 most lucrative criminal industries. Number 1 being drugs, number 2 being arms, weapons, number 3 human trafficking. We actually poised them in that order for many years, but recently statistics are showing us that they kind of all just wash together. Human trafficking we estimate that it brings in about $150 billion a year worldwide. So I'm thinking of the industries that I know of, like let's throw some out. Nike, Google, Starbucks, the NFL, and Disney. Those people make a lot of money, right? If we were to combine all of the annual net profits of those companies, that would barely reach $150 billion. And so we know that human trafficking alone, which would sit about 3rd, is what we have said, is an incredible money-making machine. And that makes it a very difficult beast. And so when we think about drugs, we often see that drugs and human trafficking go hand in hand. Because when you have a person, they can be sold over and over again. So that makes it a lucrative industry and makes it a commodity, which is horrible. People selling people, human beings selling human beings. But it also begins to become a commodity within the drug trafficking as well. And so people will say, do you see a connection between drug trafficking and human trafficking? And the answer is completely yes. And so Jason is actually with us today. Jason is really a specialist in being able to talk to us about what does it look like specifically with the drug heroin across our nation today. He speaks all over, and we're so grateful to have him to share with us today. As we look at the effects of heroin on our society, and as he's speaking today, I just want y'all to kind of keep that in the back of your mind about that connection between drug trafficking and human trafficking. And I'm actually looking forward to hearing from Jason this morning. There's a lot I need to learn about this industry. Just last night, I was watching the news, and there was a 17-year-old young man in a town very close to here who died of heroin overdose. He was in high school. So I know it's a prevalent problem here in Springfield and all over our nation. And so you all welcome Jason as he comes to share with us this morning.
Can you guys hear me okay in the back? I will. Is the back okay? Yeah. No, okay. Awesome. All right. Wait, I want to do it this way. Okay. Oh, you're fine. You're get going. I'm going to start yakking while they're setting up. I have a PowerPoint there. I have to, everyone always makes fun of me because I always need a PowerPoint unless I'm talking for like 5 minutes because I get off on tangents and sidetracks. Okay, it wasn't my fault, it's all matters. All right, moving over here. Anyway, so Casey actually contacted me like a year ago to speak at this conference, and I put her off for like ever, and I apologize for that. Usually this time of year I'm in Denver, Colorado. I spoke at a conference there every year for 5 or 6 years, and I was kind of hoping that, believe it or not, I wouldn't be in Breckenridge, Colorado this time this year, because I had been there so much, and I kind of wanted the opportunity to maybe stay more local and do something like this. Actually was more appealing to me, so I was glad things worked out. So I do apologize for keeping you on the line forever. A lot of people do ask why. I've been a nurse and paramedic since 1992 is when I started into this industry, and I was born and raised in this area. So I went into healthcare, and fast forward to about 7 years ago when I went into trauma services. So I primarily only take care of traumatic injuries. So now that does have a wide range of things above and beyond car crashes. It does involve domestic violence, child abuse, and the reason why is because about 40% of our patients are impaired. Their decision making has been altered to the point where they're doing things that put them at risk for trauma. So when I went into the prevention industry, I quickly found myself having to talk a lot about drugs and alcohol to young people, so high school, junior high, and if anyone ever has talked to that age group, you know that they test you to figure out if you know what you're talking about. And at the time, there was some of these drugs were, to be honest with you, especially when it comes to some of the topics like marijuana, for example, I didn't really understand completely what I needed to. So I had to learn a lot. This is the same time that all the synthetics started to hit the market in our area, the K2s and the spices and all that kind of stuff. So it was really something that I kind of had a passion for. More than anything was the fear of not being able to answer a 15-year-old's question, therefore spinning them in the wrong direction of decision making. So there was a lot of factors there. So 2016 going into 17, I would probably say that about 60% of my talks are somewhat around topics similar to what we're going to be talking about. I talk fast. I apologize for that. Typically, it's because I put too much information into a time frame that doesn't probably allow for that. So if I get moving too quick, just throw your hand up at me. If there's something that you have a particular interest in, you can have my PowerPoint. I will give you a 400-slide presentation that I do with DEA and law enforcement on drug recognition and drug awareness. I'll be more than happy to share any of that stuff with you. I was asked to talk about heroin and just a couple of the other things that we're seeing in the area. But if you have any questions, please ask. She had mentioned the 17-year-old, actually, that young person was brought into our facility, and they were actually from a school that I've been to every year for the past 6 years. So that really kind of bugged me and really bothered me, because this is a school that has been dedicated toward drug information and prevention. And then the fact that young man came into us on Monday morning was definitely, that's always kind of one of the questions I ask is how old are they, where are they from? And when I found out he was from one of the schools I go to every year, it was like, ugh, is that someone I talk to? Is that someone maybe I could have said something differently to? So when I go through kind of my information, my PowerPoint, it's something I always look at is we need to understand something to be able to truly drive prevention, so we can give people the right information, or at least steer them in the right area of information so we can get them on the path of making better choices. And that's essentially when I talk about any drugs in particular, it's about either recognition, it's about safety issues as far as, dealing someone who's impaired with some of these things versus how to get these people ultimate treatment, and then ultimately giving them good information so they can make good choices toward prevention. So like I said, yell at me if I get on too quick. I'm not going to stand up on that podium. I have ADHD, so I can't stand in one place. So you're filming me, aren't you? I'm moving, so get ready. All right. So the first thing people always ask themselves is why people do what they do, and what are some of the choices that they make, and why does someone choose to take these substances? And there's really a lot of reasons behind that. Some of the ones we know of, I put them on the screen to fit in. And I think it's important if you're somebody, and I know there's different, obviously people in the audience and what you guys do different things and have different roles, but it is important if you do work with young people to understand that experimentation, fitting in, because everyone else is doing it. These are common phrases that we hear, but more often than not, it's common phrases that I hear other adults say. And I think it's important that we understand that I'll have a parent come up to me and say, wow, I have a 12-year-old and I really just don't want them doing what other kids are doing. I'm like, yeah, you do. And they look at me kind of funny. I'm like, you want your kid to do what most kids are doing? And they're like, oh. I'm like, most kids aren't doing drugs. Most kids put their seatbelt on. Most kids don't smoke. Most kids do really great things. We're almost creating an environment of built-in peer pressure or implied peer pressure because of sometimes we don't give enough good information back to our young people. I can go to a 5th grade class, and this is a school that looks through the window, and they can see their high school where they'll be in 3, 4, or 5 years, and they have brothers and sisters and classmates they look up to, and I'll ask them those questions. What percentage of your classmates smoke? 90? Jeez, okay. Well, the national average is 11, but okay. What percentage wear their seatbelt? 3. Okay. What percentage of them do you think use drugs on the weekends? 85. Drink alcohol? 95. Well, what happens when you hit high school here? You just run a wheel off and start doing all these horrible things? And so they kind of look at you, and it's important, depending on who you're talking to and what age group, obviously, young kids are doing a really good job. And it's important that we remind them of that. Yes, bad decisions are made, but if you look at truly who drives our drug industry, it's people, unfortunately, in the workforce. It's the people in this room, and I can't see everyone, so some of you may not fall within the 22 to 35 age group. But that's who's doing 80 to 85% of the illicit drug use in the United States. It's adults, people in the workforce. So sometimes we need to give our young people more credit. Experimentation. The prevention industry, which I'm new to, hasn't done a very good job really driving home the importance of experimentation, how deadly it is. So when I reverse roles and I sat in these schools where people used to come and talk to us, it was, if you smoke forever, your lungs rot out, you get lung cancer. If you drink forever, you get, cirrhosis of the liver. And if you do these other hard drugs, you end up, homeless, and all these horrible things happen. And no one ever really talked about one time and how deadly it can be. And that's truly what we've seen now with the heroin, with the new synthetics, with some of these drugs out there. They're meant, essentially, these drug dealers and drug manufacturers are designing them for what I call the experimentator. Not only that's a word, but it's for people that, whether they're 18 or 25, they don't have any intentions of leading a life of drug use. They may be a academic person in school, and they have dreams and hopes, but I want to try this, or I want to try this because I'm at a party, for example. Because no one ever really told me how dangerous experimentation was. So that's kind of something that you're going to see change in the prevention industry is driving home the importance of experimentation, because it is really something, especially when we talk about heroin, you'll see that. To do better, to feel better. This was always tough. So is there anybody here that talks to young children, i.e. 5th, 6th, 7th grade, has young nieces, nephews that they feel like that may be a resource for them? So if you have a 5th, 6th, 7th grader walk up to you and says, I heard that heroin makes you feel good, what would you say? You raise your hand. What would you say? You're going to tell a 7th grader that drugs make you feel good?
I'm going to say, there are a lot of things in your life that can make you feel good. That doesn't necessarily mean they're the right food.
All right, so that was a perfect answer, with the exception. I personally always lead off with, I wouldn't know personally, but just a personal thing, that's just me. After saying that, you can't lie to young people, okay? Are you going to get into chemistry detail with a 7-year-old? No. So I think the appropriate answer there to a kindergarten kid is fine. When you get to that 5th, 6th, when really it's been proven time and time again that the only chance that we have to kind of reverse the cycle of some of this drug and experimentation, especially with young people, is through accurate information and education. It's truly our best way to do this. So no, I don't go around at young kids across the country and tell them that drugs make you feel good. But if you're certainly put on the spot and it's your niece, it's your nephew, it's your child, it's a group that you're working with, it is important to say, you know what, obviously there's a reason why people take these drugs and substances. And I'll get a little more how I explain it in a minute, but you have to give accurate information, because I can promise you if you start lying to the person, because more than likely they've either already tried it or they had a really close friend that has tried it and told them something completely different. So unfortunately, these drugs can do that. All right, so this is something that I use quite a bit. You've been lied to, and I'll talk on that a little bit. I'm talking to the wrong people. I've already touched on that a little bit. I use this slide to talk about with kids. All right. I talked to about 100,000 kids a year, a variety of different ages. That's not really the right group. I need their parents. I can't get 100,000 parents together. If I could, I would trade. There's not 100,000 parents trapped in a room for 7 hours a day, 9 months out of the year, whatever it is like kids are in school. And that kind of goes back into that. Kids really do a pretty good job. So you've been lied to. So how do I know if my kids use this? How do I know if my friend's using this? What do I look for? And these are some of the answers that we've typically always given people. Their circle of friends change. They'll lose interest in music. They'll lose interest in sports. Yeah, because athletes and musicians don't use drugs. That's probably not a good example. All right. Their grades will do what? They drop, right? I ask students this almost every presentation I do, and especially if I have small groups. Does anyone know any classmates or friends that make excellent grades that do drugs? Almost every hand goes up. Okay? I have parents that come into our facility with a 15, 18, 24-year-old overdose, and they're like, obviously not the 20-year-old, but the young kids, they get good grades. They don't have sketchy friends. They still love music. They love debate, whatever it is. And it's like that's what they're looking for. So it's important that we understand this is basically for that, back in my days, essentially the long-term use. Can these things happen? Absolutely, they certainly can. But this is what you're waiting for to happen, to let your friend know something, to get your classmate help, to call your sister that you've talked to their child and they're kind of saying some things that concern you. We've kind of missed some major things. What's in our community? Well, this one's tough. I have like 40 minutes. I can't talk about every drug out there, nor do you guys probably have a desire to hear about every one. I really kind of picked primarily heroin and a couple, just touch on some of the other ones that we get a lot of questions about. Things change very fast. Drugs are like fashion. What we've seen 15 years ago, an example, Xanax. Okay, this is a prescription drug. It's used for several things. 10, 15 years ago, we saw it a lot in the illicit drug industry. Law enforcement would get a lot of arrests with it. We would see it come in the emergency room, and it really went down. And now it's starting to go up a little bit. But you see, even some of the different towns I go to, Nixa has more of this drug, Republic has more of this drug, and things really cycle a lot when it comes to drugs. It's important, and the reason some of these slides are kind of wordy, and I'm not here to read slides to you, I mainly have them on here if you're interested in the slides. Your body hates all drugs. It hates all medicines. It doesn't matter if you give it heroin or Tylenol, it will treat it the same. It will try to neutralize it and excrete it from your system as quickly as possible. It hates everything. Now, if you have high blood pressure, you have an infection in your ear, then you have to take an antibiotic, you have a fever of 104 and you want to take a Tylenol, that's fine. But your body hates it all, and it will neutralize it, and it will excrete it as quick as possible. The issues are with some of these illicit drugs, i.e. heroin, i.e. the synthetics, all that kind of stuff, it takes about 45 minutes for your body to turn off Tylenol. And that's why if you've given it to your child and their fever goes up and down, 45 minutes, it's not working. Motrin's an hour, it's not working. It lasts about 3 to 4 hours, and then it's completely gone from your system. And that's why you give Tylenol every 4 hours. Bath salts, for example, the synthetic that became popular 6, 7 years ago, takes 5 days for your body to break that drug down. So every drug is very different. So you have that immediate effect why someone takes drugs, well, although they get a high from it, after the high's gone, your body's still working hard to try to get rid of it, neutralize it, and therefore that's where sometimes a lot of damage can be done, either short-term during experimentation use or long-term use with some of the other things. This is the line I use to talk about drugs. It's basically, and I just kind of put it up there because it really doesn't matter if it's prescription drugs, it's heroin, it's alcohol. Everyone essentially lives between 4 and 6. All right, this is a mood line. That's what I call it when I talk to people. This is how we feel. Monday's a 4, Friday's a 6. Something awesome happens to you. Whatever's awesome for you. Have children, graduate college, get the dream job, have your 4th child. Whatever is just the best in the world, you spike up to a 6, something awful happens and you lose a pet, a family member, something bad happens, your child moves out and goes to college. They come back. 3 times she came back. So don't freak out if they move away to go to college. Anyway, so that's different. So you drop down, right? So you drop down to a 4. This is the ups and downs of life. We all have that. Some people live between 3 and 5 and they have depression, okay? Some people live 5 to 7. I call them morning people, but regardless. Some people, but basically we all live right here. The selling point to drugs and the reason why people get addicted to them is because you go to here. You may have a stroke from it, you may stop breathing because of it, certainly in the heroin circumstances around heroin. But if you avoid all the pitfalls of it in a one-time use, you drop down really far, you go back up and down, where eventually, it doesn't matter if it's alcohol, prescription drugs, or heroin, everybody wakes up, they feel terrible, and then take whatever drug they want to take, just get back to that normal functioning range. Even people who are very honest with themselves, is there anyone here that doesn't get caffeine every day? They're not very pleasant to be around? Yeah, right? I'm not trying to compare methamphetamine or heroin to caffeine by any stretch of the imagination, but if you truly ask that person, why do you drink caffeine? It's not to feel great and euphoric. And so I don't have a headache, I don't yawn, so I can get back up here to where I just feel normal again, okay? So, like I said, certainly not to compare those things, but your body will allow you to take over its mood. All right, let's get started. There's all kinds of drugs. I'm going to primarily focus on a couple of them. Sorry, this probably doesn't show up very well. There's different ways that you can take these substances. The important thing and the important message behind this is always ask that additional question. If they use a slang term or someone tells you that they use a drug and you're like, what does that mean? Don't assume it. Don't Google it. That's the worst thing you can do. You need to ask that additional question. Example, I'll have a patient that comes into our facility and they've been hot railing smack all day. All right? And I'm like, what is smack? Well, it's cocaine. Is that what you think smack is? Because it's not, but okay. Is that what you've been taking? Cocaine? Yes, okay. What's hot railing? So when you take a metal pipe and you heat it up really, really hot on one end, and then you snort the substance through there. Okay, you're 1 out of 2. That is what hot railing is. So it's important to ask those additional questions, whether it's a drug and they're using some weird slang terminology. Skittling can mean taking pharmaceutical drugs or drinking cough syrup. So don't make the assumption that someone tells you that they're doing a certain drug and you know what it is, or you're going to Google it when they're away from you so you don't feel like that you're uneducated about drugs and want to ask that additional question, because it is important to ask that. Bugling, parachuting, bombing, this is how we saw this really start to become popular in the synthetics and the bath salts and those kind of stuff, because they look like little pop rocks. They're really, really small, and you're supposed to snort them. If you're in the drug industry and you're going to put how to use it, they tell you to snort it. Well, I've had pool water up my nose and didn't appreciate it. I'm not snorting anything. So what else do I got? Well, you can swallow it, but the problem is you're talking about 2 little pop rocks essentially, and if it gets in your cheek or underneath your tongue, it'll absorb that way, and you're going to lose a lot of the, quote, effectiveness from it. So they taught people, put it out on the internet, right, to put it in toilet paper and swallow it. Because toilet paper dissolves when it hits water, therefore when you swallow it with the substance in there, the toilet paper dissolves, it releases into your stomach, i.e. small intestine, and you get 90% of the drug's availability that way. So there's all kinds of slang terminology out there. I'm not going to talk about booty bumping or plugging it. You guys can Google that on your own time. Don't do it from a work computer like I did at Cox the first time. Yeah, got a weird email from the IT department. Anyway, I'm not going to get into a marijuana debate. I never will. I do think it's important. We see it a lot in our sexual assaults over the last 3 or 4 years. There's a lot of really bad, poor information out there. Even the people that feel like they have a good understanding of what marijuana is probably really doesn't. When I speak about marijuana, it is never to push someone to vote for it, for not vote for it, to like it or love it, understand it. And that's the only thing I ever ask people do when it comes to that, because we have to get rid of some of the changes in the perception with this drug. We have 24 states that call it a medicine, and this is the quick down and dirty. THC is the high part, CBD is the low part, okay? So the more THC, it's like the more sugar and the more caffeine in a Coca-Cola. The CBD is the low, the downer part. 1970, the average marijuana had 2% THC in it, 1 to 2%. Now in the state of Missouri, it's around 13 to 16%. So if someone comes up to me and they're like, Jason, you talked about 30 different drugs, and man, they're scary as heck. If my kids, that's the worst thing they're doing is marijuana, then I'm probably okay with that. Why do you say that? Well, because and they're my age, right? Well, when I smoked marijuana in college, I'm like, well, when was that? 1991. I go, please don't base your personal opinion based on your personal use and repeat that to people. And they got to look at me. I don't mean that to be a rude statement, but you're basing what you're saying off very outdated information. And they got to look at me. I'm like, Phil, please have an opinion. Go research and study it. And I'm not telling you to go to Colorado and re-up your knowledge base, all right? But you're trying to compare something that you truly have way outdated information on. And if you're trying to change people's mind or based on that concept, it can be really dangerous. There is multiple stories. This gentleman ate marijuana, went home, started hallucinating, having delusions, took his wife's life before the ambulance and police can get there. And the people who hate marijuana definitely jumped out and said, okay, people who love marijuana, you say no one hurts anyone, no one gets violent, explain that. Well, he must have been an abusive person. He must have, been physically and verbally abusive to his spouse, and he must have been psychotic. He must have been a militant. He must have been laced with other drugs. No, nothing. None of that. He purely was THC toxicity. Young man, similar story. He actually ate the marijuana. When you eat it, it can take 2 hours to hit your brain. And this is what we've started to see in our sexual assaults around the area, is people would be given unknown doses because there is no known dose because it's not regulated. And they'll be given a large amount of these edibles. Some of them that can have a lot of THC in it, a lot of them can have a lot of CBD in it. And if you get a lot of CBD mixed with alcohol, another depressant, it literally can render someone unconscious. There's also ways that you can take marijuana and mix it with acetone and separate those chemicals to where now I just have CBD oil, right? I can put that in drops of alcohol and now I can render someone unconscious in a very short time frame, especially if mixed in with alcohol. So anyway, he goes home, he consumes it, 2 hours later hallucinates, delusional, jumps off a balcony because, quote, monsters are chasing him and falls to his death. He had 7 nanograms of THC in his system. What does that mean? Well, 5 nanograms is our 0.08. Okay, that's the legal limit in Colorado. This guy plays soccer, has another horrible event. His autopsy was 38.2 nanograms. So, and I always put their names up here, one, because they're public knowledge, and two, is I want people to go and look up these cases. Similar in these, this young man actually took his own life after consuming marijuana, and he was still okay to drive. So the bottom line, if you hear things about how much you can smoke and still drive, or drive a forklift, or whatever it is that people are doing after they smoke marijuana, the information isn't there. It's not accurate. It hasn't been tested like it really needs to be. So there's just a lot of bad information out there. But we have seen people on marijuana get violent. We've seen them hallucinate, and we've seen a lot of really bad side effects from the marijuana of 2017. These edibles are really creating a problem. This is obvious. You're going to know this is funny. It's green packaging, has a marijuana leaf on it, but this isn't. You can't smell it. You can't taste it. If this was mixed in other bowls of vanilla wafers at a party, you're probably not going to know for a couple hours, and you'd either be unconscious or you could find yourself in more of a euphoric type high. I don't know why they make marijuana with the barbecue sauce. That was just weird to me. There's no questions. I told you that they couldn't ask questions. Yeah, okay, go ahead. 0.08 is 5 nanograms. Yeah, so if you have a glass of wine with dinner and drive, get in a car crash, if you're under 0.08, we have the evidence that says it didn't impair your hand-eye coordination. Colorado, if you light up a bowl, I guess, and then get in a car crash and it's under 5, they don't have the evidence, but they've said that you're okay to drive. You're welcome. So this one kind of grabbed my attention because I was at a store in Colorado in one of the trips I take, and I was like, 105, that seems like a lot. And because everything else had 5 or 10, I'm like, how much should I smoke or eat? I've not had marijuana ever or in 40 years. What do you tell people? 5 milligrams. So if you've never had marijuana ever and you go to Colorado and you want to, quote, try it, experiment with it, they will tell you 5 milligrams is what you could start with. He goes, you're kind of bigger, maybe 10, but 5. I'm like, all right, thanks, appreciate that. Anyway, and I'm like, well, that's 105. He goes, yeah, that's kind of like a Willie Nelson starter kit. You don't want to really probably start with that. This is for people who ingest marijuana every day. I said, is there exactly 105 milligrams in there? Because I know you don't know that. And he was honest, kind of, and he was like, well, we don't know there's exactly 105, but we just know there's a lot in there. I'm like, okay, fair enough. A lot of the schools I go to, they don't allow students to bring in outside food anymore, just simply because they can't keep up with all the stuff that's out there. This was an interesting case because heroin was blamed for this. I was actually in Indianapolis speaking at a conference, and this happened in one of the very small rural towns in Ohio outside one of the cities, and they had 24 overdoses, and they gave Narcan or naloxone, which is the reversal for heroin and other opiates. And I remember when I saw that, I went, that's odd. That's a lot of people. They ended up consuming MERDs, which is medical marijuana in Oregon. It's actually, this one's from Oregon, and I apologize for the bad picture. It's the only one I could get. But 24 people consumed that, and basically a majority of them had severe respiratory depression to a point some of them even stopped breathing. If you would smoke as much marijuana as you want in the 70s and 80s, you never would have stopped breathing. I'm not telling you that that was a good choice to make 20 years ago. But this is another perfect example because this is a marijuana overdose. This is not heroin. They thought it was a heroin overdose based on the way they presented. So it's just another good example of this drug has changed. It's not the same thing that you experimented with in high school, college, or even heard about when you were in school. There's all kinds of stuff out there. It's very confusing. I basically put this up there that there's about 500 websites that tell you how to separate these chemicals, and this is what we've seen with that acetone in the marijuana to create CBD oils. And this is just basically a step-by-step how to walk you through. You need coffee filters, you need marijuana, you need a grinder, you need a homemade pot that you can essentially get it anywhere as far as the cooking store and this beaker store. You can order it online, or this sock slit, whatever that thing's called, that you can either get from your school or you can get from order online. And it literally walks you through how to make it, that gives you oil, and then we've seen that oil knock people out essentially. But also you can make shatter glass. This is about 98% pure THC. And so this is not 16% leaf form. This is actually a pure form that people put in e-cigarettes and other things. Look, there's a million debate topics, and like I said before, it's not my intention to steer people's opinions. Just please educate yourself before having an opinion and making up your mind, and certainly trying to impact other people's choices. People who hate marijuana and bash on it like it's the worst thing ever and wish we never would have discovered, I am very quick to say, ooh, time out a second. There is parts of the marijuana plant that has shown promising maybe to help people with certain medical problems. Now it needs to be done correctly, but if you truly want to eliminate one of the worst plants we ever discovered, it's that one. Okay? Because that is heroin. But if I go out here and get into a car crash and my femur gets broken in half, or I have a really bad burn, I want some of that, because it's also morphine. That's where we get morphine. That's where we get codeine, which is awful personally. Dentists use it, which if there's any dentists in the room, you guys have some issues. I don't like dentists. Anyway, but that plant makes morphine, codeine, and theobromine. Theobromine is where OxyContin, oxycodone, Vicodin, blah, 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 all the pain medicines come from. So there's a need for it, but there's certainly a bad too. So there's an evil and there's a good that has come with that plant. All right, and obviously the evil is the heroin. I go to Afghanistan, all right? Go to Afghanistan, I buy a pound of heroin. I add a pound of sugar to it. How much heroin do I have? 2 pounds. Everybody agrees, but it's only 50% pure. Does that make sense? So I have 2 pounds of heroin, half of it's sugar, half of it's heroin, so it's 50% pure. So now if you imagine in 1980, before heroin gets to Southwest Missouri, it makes about 15 stops from Afghanistan through multiple shipping places, through Mexico, through Chicago, St. Louis, till ultimately it gets down here. Every time it stops, people will be like, I'm taking a little bit from my people, my industry, but I'm expected to pass 2 pounds along, so I'm going to replace it with brick dust, aspirin, stuff that probably is not even meant to be in your body, but milk powder is very popular, so they're going to replace it with things to where when the ultimate purchaser in Southwest Missouri gets it, he has 2 pounds of heroin, but it's going to be about 5 to 10% pure. So the only way that you can feel it in your brain, if you're someone who needs to alter your chemicals in your brain, is to inject it into your bloodstream. Do you think that eliminates some of the experimentators out of the picture if you have to inject it to their bloodstream through a needle into your arm? Yeah. Now, a party, a pill, something like that, sure, young people will experimentate with that. Hey, you want to try a Molly? It makes you feel good. Oh, sure, I'll try that. You want to shoot up some heroin? No, I'm not shooting up heroin. What's wrong with you? Because now we've seen impurities at 60%, 80%, it is now in a pill. 4 years ago, one of our elementary schools in Springfield, they found heroin tablets, and I'll show them to you. So they can be in capsules, they can be in pill form. So it's opened it up to a whole new generation of people who never would have even considered heroin of even being an option, simply because the purities are so high and the fact that it's just available in simply more forms. It can be smoked, it can be snorted, it can be taken a variety of different ways. So what are they mixing in it? This is the other big issue. But does anybody know why they would put Benadryl in it? Obviously heroin will help you sleep. You don't have to worry about having insomnia if you do heroin. Have you ever seen anybody take heroin, or either they're withdrawing from heroin or they're wanting to take it, they itch a lot and they scratch? So the drug industry said, if you buy our heroin, certain people, if you buy XYZ type of heroin, you don't itch, because they put Benadryl in theirs, okay? A lot of them put laxatives in there, obviously, because constipation is a huge side effect from opiates. So they actually put a ton of laxatives in there to help people be able to go to the bathroom. So they're actually trying to help people with their heroin. It's very cheap. So we have a huge issue, obviously, with prescription drug abuse in our country. People get addicted to pain medications, a variety of different forms, because the laws are stricter, because of finances, because of whatever reason, they just can't afford it anymore. But their body still says, I need opiates. Your body doesn't care if it's Vicodin or if it's heroin. It knows no difference. So if you have a handful of Vicodin and a bag of heroin, your body's like, either's fine. It doesn't matter to me. It's the same receptor in my brain. It's the same addiction. It's opiate addiction. It doesn't, if I take OxyContin, I don't have to have OxyContin. I can take any opiate and it will fill that spot in my brain that is desperately craving that drug. And that's another reason why we've seen that crossover. People that are addicted to opiates, prescription opiates, they can't afford it, they can't get it, and now they naturally just bridge over to heroin. Availability also drives what's available. So when I work with law enforcement, they're like, Jason, 5 years ago, we just didn't see really heroin around here. 6 years ago, 7 years ago, and now we see it all the time. Drugs are a victimless crime. They only affect the person that does them. If you want to do heroin, then that's you. I don't really care. I hear that sometimes in schools. Like, okay, let's work around that premise. I have a neonatal ICU that had 4 babies born addicted to heroin in 2012. Following year, it was 48, and after that, it was over 118. We actually had to hire nurses, and that doesn't count Mercy, who had the same type numbers. We're not unique, not to mention some of the other places that I deal with. So that's kind of impactful. Or there is not a state in the country that people die from more car crashes and overdoses now. Every state in the United States has more deaths from overdoses than car crashes. I have an elementary school I go to that's in a county about 45 minutes from here. They have 2 elementary schools that feed into 1 high school. They have 600 students. In the 13-14 school year, 184 students were placed into foster care because of heroin and other drugs. It's almost a third of their students. When the counselor told me that, I almost threw up. I go, 180, how many students do you have? 600. 100, that's a third. Yeah, that's all I do is go back and forth from the 2 schools, meeting with Department of Family Services, and talk to a 7-year-old on why they're going to have to go home with a strange family because of whatever's going on at home. The purity agents, our court systems have really kind of been turned upside down as far as our drug court system has seen a ton of people that once was addicted to meth, now addicted to heroin. The point is that it truly impacts our entire society. It's not an isolated person. It just doesn't affect him or her. Doesn't mean you get involved in everyone's business if you're a 9th grader, but it certainly needs to take that step and let somebody know so we can try to get that person some help. I don't really get into a lot of this because it's not my expertise, but the whole rehab process and getting someone successfully off this drug, we're just now starting to see the nightmare effects from this snowball. Because even 5 or 10 years ago, good luck finding an inpatient bed for your loved one, your family member, yourself, if you truly said, you know what, this drug's got me beat, I can't believe I'm here, but I want off this stuff. Where can I go for 30 days? Where can I go for 45 days? I've had friends who, for their children, have had to send their kids to Arizona. Well, we can get you somewhere closer, but it'll be 6 weeks. So what do I tell my 21-year-old? Just keep doing heroin for 6 weeks until a bed opens up? Because in 6 weeks, I don't know if he's going to want to go into rehab. So the whole issue of bed availability with treatment care and stuff like that is a completely different nightmare that we're going to have to, unfortunately, address. This is just Springfield. This is not Missouri or Southwest Missouri. We found we seized 26 grams of heroin in 2012 and almost 415. 2015, I think already we have over 600 this year. So it's just something that like I said, continues to grow leaps and bounds. Law enforcement, you may be seeing that they bring these posters to show you what different drugs are, and I understand the reason for that. I caution kids about that simply because you can make drugs look like whatever you want nowadays. This is heroin, and that's heroin. This is mixed with cocoa powder. So we want to make sure and not to try to create a level of safety, if you will, just because, well, it didn't look like what they showed me before. This is black tar heroin, which used to be considered, quote, the good stuff several, 5 or 10 years ago. That was 30% pure, and we just don't even see much of that anymore. Everything we see is in this powder form. It's compressed into a pill or a capsule. This is oxycodone that you would get from CVS, Rite Aid, wherever you get your prescription drugs from, and this was one of our elementary schools where we found heroin. It was 2013, actually, so. Well, it's scored, it has a V on it, which is probably hard to see. Well, that means they spent $60 and got a pill-making machine. Right? Just because something looks like a pill doesn't mean it came from a reputable pharmacy. You can buy anything from a $60 pill-making machine like this to a $1,200 really nice one. You can put your phone number on there, you can put, your address or anything that you want, essentially, you can imprint onto a pill. But once again, this is how the drug industry feeds into that perception of this is a safe pill, and it's just a 10 milligram Vicodin when actually it's an unknown concentration of heroin. Hit play, please. That sounded kind of orative. So this is a video. There's not sound to it. There's a video that shows someone. It creeped me out to actually show the video with a needle in his arm. So he's on a city bus in a city, and he just injected heroin into his bloodstream. You can see how long it took, which is almost immediate, where he just passes out. So this is someone who's done a lot of drugs before. He's certainly beyond that experimentator phase. But this literally, it's a guessing game every time they take the drug on what the purity is and also what is mixed with it, because now we're seeing them mix a lot of other potent narcotics with it. So you saw the law enforcement with the rescue shots and the nasal Narcans, and Narcan or naloxone is basically an opiate reversal. It knocks all of those opiates off that receptor in the brain. It doesn't matter if it's heroin or OxyContin. I have 40 schools now in our area that have this in their nurses station. Simply because the American Heart Association says you have 6 minutes after you stop breathing before irreparable brain damage occurs. Can you get an ambulance to your church, to your school, to your home in 6 minutes? I don't care where you live, good luck. It's probably not going to happen. Now, not all overdoses completely quit breathing. Sometimes they breathe 3 times a minute, 4 times a minute, and you have a lot longer than that. But this is just, unfortunately, although it's very controversial, places like Dallas, Texas, that have put trauma kits up with tourniquets and bandages, and they have it right next to the AED. You have people who have heart attacks to save those. The next to go up on this wall is naloxone or Narcan, because that's the 3 biggest killers in our country: cardiovascular disease, trauma, and overdoses. So law enforcement starting to carry it. First responders are starting to carry it. They're starting to put it in schools, and I really feel like probably within 5 years, whether you agree with it or not, unfortunately, it's probably going to come to that, simply because our problem is just keeps getting more and further out of hand. There's all kinds of different ways. This is basically an AED for Narcan. So the AED is like that, it walks you through on how to put it on someone that's having a heart attack. This is also, it walks you through on how to inject it through someone's jeans, even into their leg, to give them that medicine. They have nasal spray that you can shoot up someone's nose. So this is something that we're starting to see that's able to be prescribed or able to be given with people who maybe run like halfway houses or have a quote, a high risk audience for that group. When do I have to stop talking? Because I know how fast to talk. I don't have mine. Okay. I won't show this video because it angers me. This is the video, and you probably heard about it. It was 3 or 4 weeks ago, maybe longer. And it was a young lady who overdosed. So she took the drug in the parking lot. She walked into the shop with her child. She overdoses and passes out. And it shows her, 2-year-old maybe. She acted older than that, but she's very small in stature. But she literally pulled on her mom's arm, hugged her, did everything she could, forever before the person put down the camera and went and picked up the child. So after like 3 seconds, I'm like, are you ever going to pick the child up? Are you ever going to? And so that's why I won't show the video, because I get mad every time I see it. But these are becoming more and more commonplace, unfortunately. And it's not the sketchy looking person. It's not the Doesn't care how much money you make, what color you are, what side of town you live on. It is truly all over our country, unfortunately. Real quick, I just want to touch, and this is proof that information and education works. We do not have a meth problem in our high schools, in our junior highs. Yes, occasionally something happens. Yes, occasionally some kid does something and they take meth. I'm not going to say it doesn't happen. But if you look on the national average, we have lower use of meth anywhere in our schools than anybody else, although we're the meth capital of Missouri. Why? Because our kids know what it is. They've heard about it forever. They've seen pictures of homemade meth labs, of mobile meth labs. They've seen house fires. They've seen pictures of what it can do to your outer appearance and posters in their schools. So therefore, when 6 years later, when they're at a party in junior high, high school, college, and someone goes, "You want some meth?" All that goes through their brain, and they're like, "Nope." Unfortunately, they'll take Molly, they'll maybe take something else, but this is just proof that we have to give our young people information and education, because essentially they do make good choices. Is it getting better or worse in Missouri? Well, this is a twisted statistic, all right? We have done a lot better with meth labs, but meth use continues to increase in our area. It can either look like that, it can look like that, or now what we're seeing is very popular is liquid meth, all right? Because that's how they're shipping it, trying to avoid law enforcement. They spray it on blotter paper or even cards, and then they quote e-paper, and that's what that's created from. The meth labs, we had 77 meth labs in 2012, and we got 3 pounds. 2015, we got 15 meth labs, awesome. But yet, 73 pounds. So I've heard radio ad spots or radio spots say, "Oh, meth is down in Missouri." 2 weeks later, meth is up in Missouri. And that's why they say things like that. So they'll twist it. Believe it or not, this is good. Okay, and the reason this is good is because the majority of meth labs in Missouri, there was children under the age of 8 in them. So those cause horrible burns, meth exposure. So anything we can do to drive our homemade meth labs down is great. But unfortunately, meth is still very prominent in our area. We have to get this out of our mindset. And yes, I understood why this New York City detective took these pictures and they put it in schools and they used it to try to educate people on how meth would literally, tear up your outward appearance, because obviously everyone has everybody has a different regard to their appearance, but everyone, doesn't want to see a rapid change like this. But the drug addict of 2016 is her. It's not him. And we have to get that out of our brains. It's that experimentator. This young lady died of heroin when she tried it for the 3rd time. And she didn't inject it, she took a pill. Went to school and overdosed in her bathroom. So we have to get that out of our mindset. Well, she doesn't look like that. He doesn't look like that. They get good grades. They have friends. They play sports. That's all. We have to forget all that out of our brain. We have to think completely different, because now these drugs are so strong. And there's only one more point I want to make. I know I'm running out of time. The drugs of our generation is all the synthetics. I'm not going to get into that. But how it ties in with heroin is they're now taking those synthetics and replacing that 50% sugar with 50% designer drug. And this is why we've seen our overdoses skyrocket. Yes, the heroin is stronger, but believe it or not, if you look at some of the statistics the DEA has found, the actually purity of heroin is going back down. But it's not sugar anymore, it's fentanyl. It's designer Vicodin that they're replacing instead of sugar. So the heroin, the opiate's going down, the designer part is going back up, and it is just as potent. I'm going to run through this just kind of quick, guys, and like I said, I'll stay as long as I want, or as long as you guys need me to for questions. But all the synthetics started 10, 12 years ago with the spices and the K2s. So this was the first one that we saw. This was actually a pharmacy in 1970 that wanted to create a new drug for people with intractable pain for cancer. They did. They designed this drug, and they were like, they never even got to the naming process. So U is up, John. And it was their 47,700 recipe that they've come up with. I call them recipes, they call them compounds. And they said it's for pain. The problem is it was too strong. It was 7 to 8 times stronger than morphine. So no pharmaceutical company picked it up. They're like, it's too strong. When we have something similar in fentanyl, it has side effects that, we see a lot of overdose. It just doesn't work. The drug industry was like, let's look through all the analogs of the last 30 years of reputable companies that have tried to create pain medicines, but they've failed because of the side effects, because of the whatever. Because we can take that drug, mix it in with our heroin, or just sell it directly, and we have an audience for that. We have people that are addicted to heroin, addicted to other opiates, and that will fill the void in that person's brain, and it does. Oh, my screen just go greener? Is that me? Maybe it's me. It's never been tested on anyone. The cost is something that really jumps out. $60 for 300 milligrams, but remember, it's 7.5 times stronger than morphine. So if you just do the easy math, 2,100 milligrams, to give you an idea of what that means, if you get to a car crash and you break your leg, we probably give you at most 10 milligrams. So that, you're getting 210 times that dose for just $60. So it's very cheap for people to buy online. Tons of different synthetics. I want to jump ahead to these other ones, guys. I apologize. I don't want to run through too much of someone else's time. Come here. Here it is. All right. So these ones that have made a lot of media splash lately. W18 and carfentanil. They're both very similar. Nix's had seen quite an issue with the carfentanil. In 1984, the University of Alberta came up with this one. It was the 30th, out of 30 compounds, it was the most strong out of all of them. No pharmacy picked it up. It's 100 times stronger than fentanyl and 10,000 times stronger than morphine. 10,000 times stronger than morphine. Of course it didn't get picked up. You wouldn't be able to, you'd have to dilute it down so much. It's a safety hazard from a healthcare standpoint. Don't give that patient just a little bit more because they'll put breathe in, right? So it was just too dangerous, but the drug industry picked it up, and this is what we're seeing mixed with heroin now. Carfentanil did get picked up. Guess who picked it up? Veterinarians who work on elephants. So that's why you hear news stories of animal tranquilizers now being mixed in with heroin. This is why. The pharmacy in 1974, and they actually came up with a name for it. And they partly named it because it was going to be picked up by veterinary clinics to be used on animals. So if you look at all the stories now, Florida, Indiana, Ohio, where you will see, and I'll zip through the news stories here, you will see a large amount of overdoses in a very short time frame. It all has mixed with carfentanil. So New Haven, Connecticut, 16 overdoses and 2 deaths in 4 hours. West Virginia, 27 overdoses in 4 hours. 21 overdoses in Columbus in 6 hours. So these are these stories where you see mass overdoses from a short time frame. These are the last 2 videos, guys. I'll stop talking. This is actually a person who has these synthetics in their system, and he drove through a storage unit. There's a huge safety concern with these synthetic drugs, whether it's mixed in with heroin or they take it just directly. This person actually does a really good job. Once he realizes this person doesn't even recognize him as a person, he backs away from him. Right here, see how he's protecting himself? Later, when they asked him why he did that, he said, "I thought I was being attacked by a monster." Think about the kid that jumped over the balcony from the THC overdose, the millions of crazy stories that we hear from synthetics. All of this stuff has very similar things that it does to your brain. So he backed away, did the right thing. This has really created an issue from the healthcare standpoint. This is why I work a lot with law enforcement, first responders and EMS personnel on how to take care of these people, because they can get very violent and they can be very, very dangerous. And these aren't evil people, they're just people that made the wrong choice and took the wrong drug, essentially. This is the last video. Can you kill the sound on this somehow? There's a couple bad words in here that evens too much for me. This young lady, oops. All right. This young lady is sitting on a bus. We live in a camera world, right? And the guy said she started kind of acting weird, so he started filming her. You'll notice when she puts her phone up, watch her eyes and her face. Something happened in her brain with those drugs, and she actually took heroin with synthetics. The person that she gets ready to attack was not with her. They weren't passengers riding together. He was someone minding his business, sitting there eating his Pringles. He offers her a Pringle, which I thought was nice, as he's taking punches in the face. I was like, that's cool. He's really trying not to fight this lady back. He knows something's wrong with her. The love for the Pringles is weird. He's got to put his lid on. That's just weird, but whatever. So I was kind of upset by the fact, and this is when the guy was yelling at this guy to not to go and just to leave her alone. But so that I didn't appreciate that part of it. But regardless, these are people that sit in our waiting rooms in the emergency room. Somebody that could be a family member, somebody that it can hit that fast. And that's some of the also the problems that we have seen with some of these synthetics, and the half-life lasts so long. They'll take the drug on Friday night, and then Sunday morning or Monday morning they have this weird reaction from it. What'd you take today? Nothing. You know, maybe they took the drug 2 or 3 days ago, and that's how strong these drugs are. We all play different roles, whether you're just a parent, right? But we have to educate and get accurate information to our young people, to essentially anyone who will listen to us. It's the only way we can fight this problem. But we can't stick our head in the sand. I thought that was a really cool slide. Now it kind of looks creepy. Anyway, so you just can't. You can't ignore it. Heroin's here. It's not a big city drug anymore. It's out there. We have to address it. And unfortunately, it's sad. It really stinks, but it's here. And it's really the only chance we have is through information, education, and try to improve the decision making of our young people. So, people in general. I will take questions. Okay.
Is there any documentation or thought as to how these drugs specifically are getting into our community?
Our community itself? Sure. So I get a lot of questions, and it kind of goes back to the thing I said earlier about you'll see drugs change really fast. So there are certain, I will tell you that gang violence, there's a very close proximity to gang violence with drugs and things like that. But what we're starting to see, people who partake in illicit other lifestyles, whether it's trafficking, whether it's drugs, whether it's the selling of prescription drugs, now they're taking on this. There's certain people in our area that essentially that's their life, is illicit activities. Some of them I only do meth, I only do prescription drugs, and we're starting to see them open up to essentially anything. So most places, it's the gangs that bring it into the area. So obviously that's where, the street level drug dealer is certainly nice to get off the streets, but law enforcement's goal is to try to figure out exactly that. And it changes a lot, but that's ultimately their goal. Unfortunately, typically if you trace the roots back, you literally can trace it St. Louis, Chicago, either the East Coast, West Coast, Mexican cartel. Most of the heroin's Mexican heroin, I can tell you it comes from Mexico. Afghanistan used to be all the heroin, but now we're seeing other countries grow heroin. But initially how it makes 400 port stops and ultimately gets to us, it's different each time. But it's almost always sent through the Mexican cartel or other gang affiliations. Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. That's all it is. It's not only what it's cut with, but it's also the strength of the heroin too. So some of the other, and I didn't go over all of them, but what they're trying to do is because heroin has that initial, and it's confusing for people who don't, opiates are a big downer. I mean, it just knocks people out. But before that knockout period, people feel euphoric, they feel energetic, and a lot of people, they will almost say it's not a downer. They'll describe it more as an upper because you get that high uplifting part. So that's a lot of times what it's cut with. So they will cut it with ephedrine, caffeine. So what they're trying to do is extend that very brief high euphoric part, because before we associated with, also you have to remember, fast in, fast out. So if I inject something, it hits fast, and then you nod off. To where if it's in a pill, you have a slow, gradual high, and then a slow, gradual drop off. Yeah, you'll still see the nod and stuff, but it's not nearly like what we've seen before. So believe it, and this sounds bad, and I'm always careful what audience I say this with, but when you take something orally, the high lasts longer. So if you have someone that shoots up, they get 5 or 10 minutes of whatever, and then they pass out. People who take prescription drugs a lot of times, they will feel great for several hours before they start to get sleepy and pass out or need more of the drugs. So it's the concentration of the heroin, also what it's mixed with. But the drug industry, they know that too. So what they try to do is and that's where the phrase speedballing comes from. So actually you can put cocaine in it to try to give you the best, quote, the best of both worlds. You want to feel high without that nod off, we threw a little cocaine which sounds weird, but that's their mindset. Yes, ma'am.
When you're talking about drug industry, you're talking about the illegal drug industry.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Now, I will tell you that if I could pick 2 drugs to completely eliminate, especially because you have to realize I deal a lot with kids, so most of if I could pick 2 drugs that I really would want to eliminate as far as quote being a problem, it would be prescription drugs and alcohol. Because that's our 2 biggest issues in our schools. So I don't want anyone ever to leave any of my talks and think, oh, my kid's doing bath salts and heroin. And our biggest issues is alcohol, prescription drugs, marijuana, and then heroin. But heroin has moved all the way up from last to 4th, and that's why, and we're starting to see it hop over the prescription pill, and that's why it's really scary. But like I said, but that's in that young group. The people who are doing the heroin, the cocaine, stuff like that, that's your 20 to 35-year-olds that are out driving school buses, driving buses, and working out with everybody else essentially. Yes. Oh, no more. No more questions.
So there's something that you don't know about Jason is that I had he had said he thought he could come and speak. I asked him, what his fee was, and he said no. He said I'm not going to charge you guys anything, and I insisted. I said no, because I've heard him before and gained so much. It's such valuable information. I said, Jason, we honor what you do, and we definitely want to pay you, and he refused. And on top of that, yeah. On top of that, he makes his phone number available and his email, and he's so accessible. And our community is just greatly benefits from having him. He's such an asset. And did you guys find that helpful? Was that just a premise? Let's give her a round of applause. We appreciate you and your heart. Thank you, Jason, very, very